The National Desk, America's News Now.
Coming home, the first American hostages held in Gaza are released while efforts remain to free the others.
The urgent work to free every single American, to free all other hostages.
Argote is not in custody and is considered armed and dangerous.
A community left in shock as a judge killer is on the loose.
How do you plead to count 15, conspiracy to commit filing false documents in indictment number 23 SC 188947?
And another Trump ally takes the deal as pressure mounts against Donald Trump while a threat of jail time looms. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. As we come on the air tonight, 2 American hostages are on an Israeli military base after being released by Hamas, as confirmed by the Israeli Hostage Center. Here's what we know right now. 2 U.S. citizens, a mother and daughter, were released from a group of more than 200 who were abducted on October 7th. Judith Renan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie reportedly handed over at the border with Gaza and now in the care of Israel's defense forces. Natalie's father says she is, quote, doing very good. No word on Judith's condition. They are from Chicago and had been visiting relatives when they were taken. The 2 now on their way to be reunited with family, according to the Office for Israel's Prime Minister. Hamas says they were released on humanitarian grounds because the mother is in, quote, poor health, and a release deal that stemmed from negotiations between Hamas and Qatar. Here's what Secretary of State Antony Blinken had to say today.
We expect a team from the U.S. Embassy to see them very shortly. Over the coming hours, they'll receive any support and assistance that they need. And of course, we're very anxious to be able to reunite them with their loved ones.
It comes as the strikes in Gaza continue today. Palestinians digging through the rubble of a Greek Orthodox church that was hit by an Israeli airstrike in an effort to destroy a nearby Hamas control center. The Gazan Health Ministry says 16 people there were killed. Casualties mount as critical aid needed to alleviate a dire humanitarian crisis continues to be held at the border between Egypt and Gaza, showcasing the fragility of a deal brokered by President Biden to get the aid in. It's unclear why the aid has not begun to enter. Biden today saying that after talking to leaders of Egypt and Israel again, he expects the aid to start flooding in the next 24 to 48 hours. But right now, as I said, that humanitarian aid is stuck at the border. Trucks remain held at the Rafah border crossing. Desperately needed water, food, fuel, medicine, and medical supplies. Gaza under a total blockade right now of resources by Israel. All of this stemming back to the Hamas attack that happened on October 7th.
The shortages are going to kill many, many people. It's absolutely life or death at this point.
Human rights groups say the crisis has been exacerbated by the evacuation of Gazans from north to south as directed by Israeli defense forces as Israel prepares now for a ground offensive. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan out as the next potential Speaker of the House. Behind closed doors, Jordan lost a secret ballot to remain as the Republican nominee. That followed a morning vote where he lost a third ballot for the job, leaving the party at odds on how to proceed forward.
The 8 of us have said that we are willing to accept censure, sanction, suspension, but if what these holdouts need is a pound of our flesh, we're willing to give it to them in order to see them elect Jim Jordan for Speaker.
Patrick McHenry is serving as Speaker pro tem. We need to empower him to serve temporarily as Speaker so that we can move this legislation across the floor.
Atrel Nashar is live in Washington, D.C. with more on what we can expect next.
Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan began Friday seeming to compare his long-shot bid for the speakership to the Wright brothers' invention of the airplane.
44 years we go from 2 guys flying 100 feet to another American breaking the sound barrier in a jet.
Cardenas. But after the third vote on the House floor, it was clear his efforts would never take off.
A speaker has not been elected.
On a secret ballot Friday afternoon, a majority of House Republicans voted against keeping Jordan as their Speaker nominee.
I told the conference it was an honor to be their Speaker designee. We need to come together and figure out who our Speaker is going to be.
With emotions running high, members broke for the weekend with plans to hold a candidate forum Monday night. Some Republicans doubt whether anyone in the party can get the 217 votes needed to be Speaker. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said this when asked if the Republican conference is broken.
We are in a very bad place right now, yes.
They hope to reach a consensus and hold another vote on the House floor Tuesday. Until there's a new Speaker, the House cannot move legislation. With a long to-do list, they have no time to waste. The deadline to fund the federal government is November 17th, and the White House says its runway for aiding Israel and Ukraine is getting shorter by the day.
Every day matters for those national security priorities, but also for those who want to enter the Speaker's race. Sunday at noon is their deadline, Amira, to file their candidacy with Conference Chair Elise Stefanik. And we certainly expect it to look a lot different than the original candidate forum that the Republicans held back on October 10th, when there were just two viable names for Speaker, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan.
Wow, so much going on right now. And Atra, has anyone thrown their name in the hat quite yet?
Yeah, it took less than an hour for people to start putting their names out there. Now, the one who seems to be poised to gain the most support, that makes the most logical sense from a leadership standpoint, is the current House Majority Whip, Tom Emmer of Minnesota. Now, at this hour, since I last checked, he's not issued an official statement, but sources on the Hill say he's been making calls and is certainly poised to make an announcement. In fact, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy already said he'd endorse him. Now, we do have official statements and announcements that they are running from the following congressmen. Bear with me here. It's quite a list. Kevin Hern of Oklahoma, Jack Bergman of Michigan, who, by the way, yesterday said he didn't want the job, but he'd be okay as temporary speaker. Byron Donalds of Florida, Austin Scott of Georgia, and Pete Sessions of Texas. It's entirely possible, Amir, that list could grow or it could shrink.
Wow. A lot to sift out here, and I know you'll be staying on top of it. Atral Nashar live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you as always.
Thanks.
Well, tonight, another guilty plea in Georgia, this time from former Trump attorney Ken Chesebro, who has struck a deal with District Attorney Fani Willis. As part of the agreement, Chesebro expected to serve 5 years probation and pay $5,000 in restitution, and he has agreed to testify at future hearings on election fraud. Very similar to the deal that was reached yesterday between Willis and another ex-Trump attorney, Sidney Powell. Chesebro is now the third to admit guilt of the 19 co-defendants who were charged. Meanwhile, in New York, Donald Trump has been threatened with jail time. The judge presiding over Trump's $250 million fraud case, arguing Trump failed to follow the social media gag order placed upon him. Trump also allegedly did not remove a post about the judge's law clerk from Truth Social. Trump's legal team says it was a mistake, and they thought Trump was in compliance. Ultimately, Judge Goran fined Donald Trump $5,000 for the infraction.
This was a targeted attack on Judge Wilkinson. We have identified Pedro Argote, 49, of Frederick, Maryland, as a suspect in this case.
And this is the man right here who's wanted in connection with the death of a judge in Maryland. Police saying Pedro Argote shot Circuit Court Judge Andrew Wilkinson of Hagerstown in his driveway last night. Allegedly, all in retaliation of a hearing that happened earlier in the day, which resulted in Wilkinson assigning custody of Argote's children to his estranged wife. Police do believe he may be in this silver Mercedes SUV. Anyone with information urged to contact 911. In California, a policy requiring school staff to tell parents if their child asks to change their gender identification still halted after a judge's ruling yesterday. Another judge had temporarily paused the policy in September. A lawyer who had sued the school district called the policy harmful, and a final decision still needs to be made. Meanwhile, the debate over teachers having access to guns in school is heating up after a controversial move by one state. The National Desk's Angela Brown explains.
Some school corporations in Indiana are setting up armed response teams that taxpayers are paying for. This from the policy manual for Randolph Central School Corporation in Indiana, setting up an armed response team, trained staff on the use of deadly force, and allowing teachers to have access to guns locked up and biometric safes. Sergeant Betsy Smith, spokesperson for the National Police Association, says teachers are panic resistant.
So when you take an educator who wants to be armed and trained and you provide them with those tools, who better to be able to protect those children in some sort of active shooter situation or attack on a school?
We emailed the superintendent for Randolph Central. He referred us to a media statement where he called the armed response team necessary to secure lives. Fred Guttenberg lost his daughter in the Parkland shooting, telling MSNBC arming teachers is not the solution.
Since Columbine, there have been about 400 school shootings. That's a lot of school shootings. However, it's 0.3% of the total number of schools. And so the idea of arming teachers to solve that is simply, it is fulfilling the goal of a gun lobby that still wants to sell more guns.
A 2023 RAND Corporation survey found that 54% of teachers believe teachers carrying guns would make schools less safe. 20% say safer, 26% neither more nor less safe. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Angela, thank you. Coming up, an attorney was fired for posting anti-Semitic comments on social media. We look into the backlash some Americans are facing for making statements some consider to be pro-Hamas. Then, if you've eaten at Chick-fil-A, you may be eligible for a gift card or cash payment after a lawsuit. We're going to tell you why the chain has to pay out millions of dollars. Plus, federal agents busted an illegal lab earlier this year inside the operation leading to the recent arrest of the person in charge. We are back in just 90 seconds. The auto workers strike is now in its 36th day, if you can believe it. UAW President Shawn Fain said this afternoon that the union has seen, quote, serious movement from GM and Stellantis. It comes after GM made a new offer today, including an approximate 23% pay raise for most employees. Negotiations with all three automakers, they continue. A University of California Davis faculty member under fire tonight for an apparent online threat of, quote, Zionist journalists in a recent X post in which the faculty wrote that they should, quote, fear us, and added emojis of a knife, axe, and even blood. UC Davis chancellor condemned the comments and says the matter is now under investigation. But incidents like these bring up the question, how far does protection of the First Amendment go? The National Desk's Kayla Gaskins looks at a similar controversy out of Illinois.
The bitter war between Israel and Hamas carving deep division among Americans. Some appearing to take it too far, Sarah Chowdhury, a lawyer for the state of Illinois, sending these direct messages to an Instagram meme account run by a Jewish lawyer, writing, "I'd rather put you in a gas chamber with all your Zionist ancestors. Hitler should have eradicated all of you." We reached out to the state controller's office where she worked. They responded saying she admitted to at least some of the posts, adding the office has a zero tolerance for anti-Semitism or hate speech. The office was tipped off about her messages Thursday. She was fired 90 minutes later. Chowdhury was then removed as president of the South Asian Bar Association of Chicago. She's also co-chair of the Chicago Bar's Racial Justice Coalition. The bar telling us they're conducting an internal investigation. Students at Cornell calling for a professor to be fired following comments calling Hamas's attack energizing. Professor Russell Rickford initially doubled down on his comments, but in the face of mounting backlash, issued an apology.
Rickford is not the problem. He is a symptom of a deeper problem on campus. And when he made these comments about feeling exhilarated, the crowd cheered. That is the problem.
Anti-Semitic comments crippling some careers before they even begin. Top law firms now pulling offers from students at Columbia, Harvard, and NYU over anti-Israel statements. A corporate law professor at Berkeley writing a Wall Street Journal op-ed titled, "Don't hire my anti-Semitic law students."
You don't want them to be representing your clients, and you don't want them to be part of your group.
At least a dozen CEOs now refusing to hire Harvard students from the 30-plus groups who wrote an anti-Israel letter. The Graduate Student Union reportedly considering handing out emergency funds to those facing consequences for participating in anti-Semitism. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Army Private Travis King now facing charges of desertion and child pornography. Officials said last night that King has been detained by the U.S. military. He was released back to the U.S. last month after crossing over into North Korea. His mother said yesterday that she thinks something happened to him while he was deployed. And the dual U.S.-Russian journalist being held in Russia, Alsu Kurmasheva, will now be detained for another 3 days, charged with failure to register as a foreign agent. A state media outlet says she's been accused of gathering Russian military information and could face up to 5 years in prison. Kurmasheva has maintained her innocence. The Pentagon is warning that China is building up its nuclear weapons arsenal faster than it originally thought. The new DoD report also says the Russia-Ukraine war is probably helping China understand what a conflict with Taiwan could look like. Next month, President Biden is expected to meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. And the IRS, it has collected $160 million in back taxes this year by cracking down on millionaire tax evaders. The agency said it's closed 100 of the new cases it started since September and still has about 1,500 more to go. Money from the Inflation Reduction Act is helping fund the effort, but future funding on this campaign is not guaranteed. Chick-fil-A customers could be eligible for a $29 gift card or cash payment after a class action lawsuit settlement. The chain has to pay out $4.4 million over claims that it inflated delivery prices during the pandemic. Chick-fil-A allegedly promised low delivery fees, but upcharged for menu items as high as 30%. You will get an email if you're eligible. A Maryland man who received a transplanted heart from a pig now working to recover a month since his surgery. He became the second person ever to do so after he was dying from heart failure and could not get a traditional transplant because of health complications. Animal to human transplants could one day make up for a human organ shortage. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
On almost any Friday night in the stands at Emat's Field, Brody Smith is cheering on his Honaker Tigers. Brody was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at just 2 years old.
He does have CP, but We don't want that to define them and make them.
The Tiger coaches and administration came together to find a way to help Brody get past those limitations. The team deciding to make him an honorary member with his own Tiger jersey. And one of his favorite things about being a part of the team, getting to run on the field with the Tigers.
Baltimore lost a hero, one of our bravest and most dedicated public servants.
A firefighter was killed and 4 other firefighters were hurt in a fire yesterday in Baltimore, Maryland. At least 3 homes also damaged. The firefighters were honored with a procession by the city fire department, family, and other members of the community.
Seattle Police.
This is a shocking surveillance video of 3 armed men attempting to break into a home in Auburn. But what they were met with was gunfire from the homeowner after the men kicked the front door open and the suspects started running as they heard the shots. A man and woman lived inside the home, and while they did not want to go on camera, they did show us the damage left behind. They tell us the 3 men started shooting at their home as they were trying to escape and knocked down some of the fencing as they got away. A neighbor who did not want to show his face said he woke up to the sound of gunfire.
I heard a bullet go through our window and our alarm started going off, and then I just heard an exchange of gunfire, just a bunch of bullets.
The homeowner said she believes it was over 20 gunshots aimed towards the house. They add that they're grateful no one was hurt, but wonder what could have happened if they didn't protect themselves.
Well, coming up here, officials finally tracked down the person in charge of an illegal COVID lab in California. We're going to give you a closer look at the operation that has led to an arrest. The Chinese national that was arrested for illegally operating a COVID lab in Reedley, California, now expected to be arraigned in federal court in California. This took months for federal agents to find and bring him in after shutting down the illegal lab back in the spring. The National Desk's Liz Gonzalez takes us inside the operation that led to the arrest.
It's been 5 months since David He communicated with Reedley City leaders, let alone set foot in the prestige biotech lab on I Street, a lab found to be operating illegally, according to the city and Fresno County.
How do you find somebody who's been underground for a number of months?
But Reedley City Manager Nicole Ziba and Code Enforcement Officer Jesselyn Harper say his curiosity got the best of him when they reached out, asking if he wanted to walk through the lab just days after filing this $30 million claim against the city.
We don't know if maybe he was eager to get inside to see what was remaining.
instead of suspecting other motives.
It was a huge bonus to be able to communicate with this individual and arrange pretty much like a sting operation, a meetup for them to be able to pick him up.
I shook his hand and said, "Hello, David," knowing very well that his name is not David. And the federal agencies swooped in and arrested him.
That's because, according to this federal complaint, the Chinese national lied about his identity, using aliases including David He, Qiang He, Jesse Zhu, and what appears to be his real name, Jia Bei Zhu.
Absolute fraud and deceit the whole way through.
And his name, just one of a number of false statements the Food and Drug Administration attributes to him, along with activities, ownership, and control of Universal Meditech and Prestige Biotech. He's also charged with misbranding medical devices. In this case, distributing COVID tests without authorization, let alone emergency authorization from the FDA. According to the complaint, FDA investigators even found a production order dated in July or August of 2022 for 1,000 COVID tests, more than 6 months after its attorney told the FDA it stopped shipping test kits.
Because of the loopholes we're finding in our laws, that this type of activity has been able to go on for so long, and no red flags were raised.
Ziba and Harper hope this is just the beginning as other investigations continue.
We took down what I really consider to be not just a statewide menace or a valley-wide menace, but a national menace. The feeling of just relief that we are finally holding somebody accountable for this is just amazing.
Well, coming up, the new discovery that scientists just revealed about a radio wave that reached Earth from a distant galaxy. Stay with us. Are we alone? Astronomers are reviewing a radio wave that originated from a distant galaxy that we now know traveled roughly 8 billion light years to reach Earth. The fast radio burst was first detected in June of last year, but scientists in Australia have just revealed that it came from much further away than previously thought. We don't know what causes these fast radio bursts. There are a lot of explanations, but some scientists do believe it could be evidence of alien life. That is pretty convincing evidence. Exciting stuff. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us this evening for more coverage of our top stories. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.